The meta for patch 12.17 and 12.17b has been pretty stale for these past few days, with only a small handful of comps actually being playable in competitive. Deja, Saya, Darkflight Cannoneers, and lastly Dragonmancer Nunu has been dominating the top 4 in almost every high elo lobby, of course with the occasional Aushin sneaking into the top 3. Hopefully 12.18 is gonna rebalance the meta, toning down some of the completely broken comps, while opening up for more flexible playstyles. I'd personally like to see Siphon and Pantheon being more playable, as well as Xiaoyu, who's honestly been gone into hibernation for most of this patch. This dragon has been absolutely unplayable for the last couple of weeks. Lastly, I am praying for a zone buff. Please, Mordog, please. Laguna's mostly been a for fun comp since it completely dominated the PBE server and got turbo nerfed before launch. And it's a shame, this is one of the most fun comps in the game and I'd love to see more of it in competitive play. Now without further ado, let's see what Mordog has in store for us. These are the patch notes for 12.18, going live next Wednesday. And right off the bat, we can see some much needed trait changes. Cannoneer gets a pretty large nerf at 4 Cannoneers, and a small nerf at 6 Cannoneers as well. Meanwhile, mages are getting buffed at 5, 7 and 9 mages. Now these buffs are pretty substantial at 7 and 9. I think we might see some more vertical mage in play after this. Vertical Dragonmancer gets hit, nerfing the base HP at 6 and 8 Dragonmancers. This is definitely meant to target Dragonmancer Nunu reroll, reeling in the survivability of Nunu in this comp, while also being a nerf to Dragonmancer Lee Sin reroll. And 6 Ragewing is taking a hit. This is meant to target the capped Saya board where you run 6 Ragewing on your final board, and the reduced attack speed is definitely going to put a dampener on Saya, making it harder for her to stack the Rage Blade and completely pop off. And a lot of the weaker Shimmer scale items are getting buffed here. Obviously we're not gonna see Gambler's Blade or Draven's Axe on this list, these items are already great, but I think all of these items actually could use a little bump up. Hopefully chasing Vertical Shimmer Scale is gonna be a little bit more worth it now. And Astral is getting a soft rework. Now the quality of the Astral Orbs will increase at every star level, while item components and full items can drop earlier than before. So this is gonna make the comp a lot more smooth and interactive to play. I have the tables of content right here, and as you can see, the odds get better and better at each increased star level. Now I'm not gonna go through all these, but the main takeaway is that we can now already get item components at 8 star level, while we can get full items at a total of 11 star level. All of this is just gonna mean more value from all of your Astral Orbs. So to sum it up, this is a pretty nice buff for Astrals. A lot of 1-cost units are getting buffed, and we might see a lot more 1-cost reroll comps emerging in the meta now. Karma 3-star is getting buffed, the same goes for Nace's 3-star and Set 3-star as well, while Jack's base armor and MR is getting buffed slightly. Meanwhile Wukong is getting a buff at all levels, hopefully this is a return of the Donkey Kong, and the same goes for Kai'Sa and Sek, getting more spell damage and spell heals at all levels. Some pretty decent buffs for Lagoon comp here. Lux is getting a slight tone down to her damage, while getting a faster cast animation. This is neither a nerf nor a buff, but it's supposed to make her feel better as a unit overall. And meanwhile, Aphelios is getting an attack speed nerf. And here's the nerf I've been looking forward to the most. Nunu's true damage amp is getting nerfed. This means that Nunu is gonna deal a lot less true damage and be less viable as a carry. Hopefully, this is the death of Dragonmancer Nunu. I for one am so down to see some other reroll comps in the meta now. And speaking of other reroll comps, Volibear is getting buffed at all levels. Pretty big buff at 3-star. And Seri as well is getting buffed a pretty substantial amount at all star levels. Reroll Volibear and reroll Seri might take over. Lee Sin is definitely not taking over, he's getting mana nerfed. Plus 10 mana doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's one more auto and it just means that he's not gonna be able to permacast and heal up, greatly putting a damper on his ability to 1v9. And lastly, Sippy is getting an 80 buff as well as a bug fix. And now we finally get to the big dragons. Deja is getting 80 back, which means that you can go for a Whisper Deja again now. Meanwhile, the spell damage of Deja's passive is getting greatly decreased. From 60 to 40 at 2-star, that's a lot of the spell damage gone from Deja's autos. Xiaoyu is getting a buff at 1 and 2-star, more damage reduction, as well as better AD scaling. And Sohm is getting a damage buff for the spell explode damage. I think that's the 3rd cast they're referring to here. Not as much as I was hoping for, but hopefully together with the other Lagoon buffs, it's gonna make the comp viable. And lastly, Tyrant Swain is getting a 1% extra heal, which actually is a whole lot. He sends out a bunch of dragons, so this is multiplied by 8 Dragonlings, actually making a pretty good buff. And for the last unit on the list, we have Azol getting a small damage buff as well as a 5% buff to his ascended damage. Does this mean that Azol is coming back as a carry? I mean, it would be nice, right? It's a legendary dragon. It would be nice if it actually did something. I gotta be honest, I kinda lost my faith in this unit by now. We'll have to wait until the patch goes live to see if it's actually gonna be viable. And now for the items. Last Whisper and Radiant Last Whisper are getting nerfed. This nerf is mainly targeting Cannoneers and Saya, where you always build this item. So I think it's a really good change. It's definitely gonna put some more value into frontline and to items like Stoneplate and Bramble. And speaking of Stoneplate, Radiant Stoneplate is getting a buff, so is Radiant Protector's Vow, while Radiant Sunfire is getting a slight nerf. And now for the augment changes. Cutthroat is getting a really big buff, making it seem super viable into an assassin comp. Dragonmancer Conference is now silver tier, and they also reworked it, so now it works like Mage Conference, where every 2 rounds you get a random Dragonmancer on your bench. Hero in training is getting a pretty big buff as well, and we also see a buff for Lucky Gloves. It should now give you better items, and it's gonna give you full items from the get-go. Dragon Imperialist now executes at 18% max health, while Pandora's Bench gives you 7 gold instead of 5, hopefully making this augment a little more consistent. Ricochet is getting nerfed, more damage reduction on bounces. Verdant Veil is getting buffed, longer CC immunity, and Weak Spot is getting the armor pen halved. I like this change. Weak Spot has been performing too well in AD comps. And this together with the Last Whisper nerf is gonna mean that frontline and armor is gonna be a lot more viable in the meta. Darkflight is getting some bug fixes. Apparently there's been some trouble with sacrificed units, both not being sacrificed and sometimes multiple units being sacrificed. Meanwhile, Neela is also getting a bunch of bug fixes. She no longer resets if the target dies from damage other than her own. On kill, she'll recast to the nearest unit now instead of the farthest. She now properly recast when she kills a corner target, and her animation is gonna look better. I feel like this should have been in the balancing part. This sounds like an overall buff to Neela. Same goes for Pirate's Greed here. It no longer grants a chest on NPC rounds, which is basically gonna serve as a nerf. And Pandora's Bench and Recombobulator will now pull the correct number of units from the pool. Meanwhile, all of these dragon augments will no longer be offered if you pick build different. And last bug fix is for Hyper Roll, where you no longer get extra experience during the Treasure Dragon. And that was all of the patch notes. So overall, I'd say this patch is targeting pretty much all of the current problems in the meta. Let me know in the comments if you guys liked all the changes. And if you enjoy videos like this, remember to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Thanks for watching and good luck on the next patch. See you guys.